There's a guy I know named Marcus, 44 years old, works in logistics management, makes around $95,000 a year, bought his house in 2018 for $310,000. He checks Zillow about twice a week, not because he's selling, just because watching that number climb makes him feel like things are going according to plan. Last time he checked, his house was worth $580,000. He's got maybe about $270,000 in equity after his remaining mortgage balance. He feels wealthy. He feels secure. He feels like the hard part is behind him. Here's what Marcus doesn't know: that $270,000 in equity is doing absolutely nothing for him. It is not compounding. It is not generating income. It is not working while he sleeps. It is trapped inside four walls he cannot access without either moving or borrowing against his own asset at 7% interest. And when Marcus retires in about 21 years, he is going to open his retirement account statement and discover that the number on that page is a fraction of what it needed to be. Because for the last decade, every extra dollar he had went into upgrading the kitchen, refinishing the deck, and paying down a mortgage on an asset he told himself was his retirement plan. It wasn't. It was a really expensive place to sleep. I spend way too much time reading Federal Reserve data, housing market research, and the kind of financial reports that most people would rather use as a sleep aid. And what I keep finding, over and over, buried in these documents, is the same structural trap. Millions of Americans are confusing home equity with wealth. They are not the same thing. And the gap between those two concepts is costing ordinary households hundreds of thousands of dollars in retirement security they will never get back. By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why homeownership, sold to you since birth as the foundation of the American dream, is actually one of the most efficient mechanisms ever designed for keeping middle-class families from building real, generational, investable wealth. I am going to show you the actual return math. I am going to show you the hidden cost structure that your mortgage broker never mentioned. And I am going to show you what happens to two identical households over 30 years when one of them treats their house as their primary wealth vehicle and the other one treats it as shelter. Let me start with a story that sounds completely unrelated. In 1637, the Dutch Republic was experiencing what historians now call tulip mania. Ordinary Dutch citizens, merchants, craftsmen, farmers were trading tulip bulb contracts for prices equivalent to entire Amsterdam canal houses. A single Semper Augustus bulb, a striped variety considered particularly desirable, reportedly sold for around 10,000 guilders. That was roughly what a skilled craftsman earned in a decade. People were mortgaging their actual homes to buy tulip futures. They had convinced themselves that the asset they were chasing had intrinsic permanent value, that prices would keep rising because demand was real and supply was limited. Then in February 1637, buyers stopped showing up. Prices collapsed 95% in weeks. The people who had bet their houses on tulips lost everything. And here is the part that should concern you deeply. The psychological mechanism that drove tulip mania is identical to the psychological mechanism driving American homeownership culture in 2026. Scarcity narrative, social validation, fear of missing out, the belief that this particular asset is different, that the old rules of valuation do not apply, that prices can only go one direction because everyone needs one and they are not making more land. Sound familiar? Now, I am not saying housing is tulips. I am saying the story you have been told about housing. The one that says buying is always better than renting, that your house is your best investment, that home equity equals retirement security. That story has a mathematical flaw so large you could drive a moving truck through it. And most people do not discover the flaw until they are 62, sitting across from a financial planner, and the planner gently explains that the number in their retirement account is not enough. Here is the math that nobody shows you up front. The average American home has appreciated at roughly 4.3% annually over the past 50 years, according to Federal Reserve historical data. That sounds solid until you account for what home ownership actually costs. The standard rule of thumb used by financial planners is that annual maintenance and upkeep on a home runs about 1% to 2% of the home's value per year. On a $400,000 house, that is $4,000 to $8,000 annually. Add property taxes, which nationally average around 1.1% of assessed value. That is another $4,400. Add homeowners insurance, average $2,000 per year. Add the transaction costs when you eventually sell, agent commissions, closing costs, transfer taxes. On a $600,000 home, those costs easily run $40,000 to $50,000. Now run the real math. Your 4.3% annual appreciation gets eaten by 1% maintenance, 1.1% property taxes, 0.5% insurance, and amortized transaction costs. Your real net after-cost return on a primary residence is somewhere between 0.5% and 1.5% annually. Compare that to the S&P 500's inflation-adjusted historical average of approximately 7% per year. Over 30 years, the difference between those two numbers is not incremental. It is the difference between retiring comfortably and working part-time at 71 because your math didn't work. Let me give you a specific scenario because this is where most people's mental model breaks. Take two brothers. Call them Dan and Kevin. Both are 32 years old in 2024. Both earn $85,000 a year. Both have $60,000 saved. Dan buys a house, $400,000 purchase price, 15% down, so $60,000 down payment, and a $340,000 mortgage at 6.8% interest over 30 years. His monthly mortgage payment is about $2,215. Add property taxes, insurance, and average maintenance, and Dan is spending roughly $3,400 per month on housing. Kevin rents a comparable place for $2,000 per month. That $1,400 monthly difference, Kevin invests every single month into a low-cost S&P 500 index fund. Here's what happens over 30 years. Dan's house, assuming 4% annual appreciation, goes from $400,000 to approximately $1.3 million. He has paid off his mortgage. His equity looks enormous. He feels wealthy. Kevin's brokerage account with $1,400 monthly contributions at 7% annual return grows to approximately $1.7 million. Kevin has more liquid, investable wealth than Dan does, and Kevin's wealth is completely accessible. He can withdraw it, rebalance it, generate income from it, leave it to his children without forcing them to sell a house. Dan's $1.3 million is trapped in a structure he lives inside. He cannot access it without a reverse mortgage, a home equity loan, or selling and moving somewhere cheaper. The asset that was supposed to be his retirement plan requires him to either go into debt or give up his home to monetize it. Here is the psychological trap that makes this so difficult to see in real time. Home ownership comes loaded with social validation signals that investing does not. When Dan buys his house, people throw him a housewarming party. His parents beam with pride. His coworkers talk about what a smart financial move he made. His sense of identity and achievement gets wrapped up in this physical asset. When Kevin puts $1,400 into a Vanguard index fund, nobody throws him a party. Nobody posts congratulations on social media. His account balance increases by a number on a screen that nobody else can see or celebrate. The social reward structure of our culture is perfectly designed to push people toward the high-status, low-return asset and away from the boring, invisible, high-return one. And the financial industry reinforces this at every level because mortgages generate massive fee income for banks, and investment products with higher returns often generate lower fees than complex financial products. The incentives are all pointing in the wrong direction. Now here is where the structural problem gets genuinely alarming. According to Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finance data, housing equity represents approximately 65% of the total net worth of middle-class American households, 2/3. The majority of American wealth is sitting in an asset class that historically returns less than 2% net of costs, cannot be accessed without transaction costs or debt, is completely illiquid in a financial emergency, and concentrates geographic and economic risk in a single asset in a single location. This is not diversification. This is the opposite of diversification. It is the financial equivalent of putting 65% of your savings into one company's stock because you happen to work there, and the headquarters is close to your kid's school. And yet, this is the default financial strategy of the American middle class because culturally it feels responsible. It feels like what adults do. It feels like building something real. So what do you actually do with this? Because I know what you are thinking. You own a house, or you are planning to buy one, or your parents own one and they seem fine. Here is the framework I would use. Step 1. Separate the shelter decision from the wealth-building decision completely. You may need to live somewhere. That is a real human requirement. But the moment you start justifying a purchase by saying, "My house is my best investment," you are making a category error. Run the numbers honestly. Calculate your real all-in monthly cost, including mortgage principal and interest, property taxes, insurance, average maintenance, and opportunity cost on your down payment. Compare that to rental alternatives in your area. If buying is genuinely cheaper on a total cost basis, fine. But many markets in 2026, after years of appreciation, and with mortgage rates where they are, renting is materially cheaper. That difference should be invested automatically the day after your rent clears. Step 2. If you already own, aggressively prioritize your retirement accounts before paying extra principal on your mortgage. I know this feels counterintuitive. Paying down the mortgage feels virtuous. It is eliminating debt. It is building equity. But mathematically, if your mortgage rate is 6.5% and your expected investment return is 7%, you are better off putting extra dollars into tax-advantaged accounts than into your mortgage. The rate differential is narrow, but the tax advantages of a 401k or Roth IRA create additional spread that makes the math clear. Step 3. Stop mentally including your home equity when you calculate your retirement readiness. Your retirement number, the one that actually funds your life when you stop working, should only count liquid, investable assets. Not your house, not your car, not anything you cannot turn into income without destroying your lifestyle. If you do that exercise and your real retirement number is not where it needs to be, you still have time to course correct, but you have to do the honest math first. Step 4. Understand the compounding asymmetry before it is too late to act on it. The cost of delaying investment compounds just like returns do. Every year you pour extra money into home equity instead of index funds, you are not just missing 1 year of returns. You are missing all the compounding that would have built on top of those returns for the next 2 or 3 decades. A $10,000 payment into your mortgage at age 40 reduces your debt by $10,000. That same $10,000 invested at 7% for 25 years becomes approximately $54,000. The decision you make at 40 does not cost you $10,000. It costs you $44,000 in foregone compound growth that you will never recover. Here is the bigger picture that ties all of this together. The American housing market has been the beneficiary of 4 decades of declining interest rates, demographic tailwinds from baby boomers, and a cultural story powerful enough to override the math. Those tailwinds are gone or reversing. Interest rates are structurally higher than they were from 2010 to 2022. The baby boomer wave is now cresting into retirement selling, not buying. Millennials, the largest generation, are already heavily in debt from student loans and cost of living pressures, and are buying houses later and at worse valuations than any previous generation. The 4% annual appreciation story that justified the entire cultural narrative around homeownership was largely a product of a specific historical moment. That moment is over. The people who will build real wealth over the next 30 years will be the ones who understand this early enough to rebalance their behavior. They will own shelter, not as a wealth strategy, but as a lifestyle decision. And they will build their actual financial security in assets that compound without limits, do not require insurance and maintenance, and can be accessed without a real estate attorney and a 6% commission. Marcus checking Zillow twice a week is not doing anything wrong. He is not stupid. He is doing exactly what his culture trained him to do. The trap was built into the story before he was born. But if you are watching this right now and the math I laid out is making your stomach drop a little bit, that feeling is information. That is the feeling of seeing the actual game for the first time. The question is not whether the trap is real. The question is whether you are going to adjust before it is too late to matter. Go run the honest numbers tonight. Not what Zillow says your house is worth, what it is actually costing you every year in real returns you are not getting. Then look at your retirement account balance and ask yourself if those two numbers are compatible with the retirement you are planning. Most people never do this exercise because the answer is uncomfortable. But the ones who do it, who really stare at the math without flinching, those are the people who make different decisions. And different decisions compounded over 25 years are the difference between retiring on your own terms and discovering at 65 that the dream you were sold and the math underneath it were never quite the same thing. Subscribe if this changed how you are thinking about it. Drop a comment with your honest reaction. And the next time someone congratulates you on buying a house, remember that what they are really celebrating is a very expensive place to sleep.